We'll now go to MP Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much. My first question is for Mr. Ghiz. We have a reseller market, a long-standing reseller market when it comes to broadband. Why would a reseller market be so detrimental when it comes to mobile?
Great question. I think you have to look at the difference between the two. And in the mobile market, it's a relatively new market, speaking. You know, it's really only 15 or 20 years old. And both governments' policies over the last 20 years has been to create more competition to help have quality networks that have good coverage and that are affordable. But it's taking a while for that to happen. So you have the three incumbents, and you also have the new entrants that are now coming in and starting to make a difference in the marketplace. And if MVNOs, mandated MVNOs, so we do have MVNOs already in Canada, we just don't have mandated MVNOs. If mandated MVNOs come in, the first target that they're going to go after is going after these new entrants or regional players that are trying.
Can I pause just for a second, though?
Yeah. Yeah.
All of those arguments apply to the mandated reseller space for broadband. So why are you making these arguments in the one context but not the other?
Well, number one, I just represent the wireless industry, and it is there are differences associated with it. So I can just really answer from the wireless industry. Plus, you're also seeing it on the other side on broadband as well, which is not necessarily my file. But when that TPIA decision did come out, we saw where all players, including the smaller players in Canada, were arguing that it was going to hurt them to be able to make investments. So at the end of the day, the point we're trying to make is that mandated MVNOs in the wireless industry will first of all undercut the new entrants, which are the ones that are creating the competition that's helping to drive down prices and do more build-outs across the country today.
Thanks very much. To TekSavvy, does any of that make sense to you?
No, I think your question, the premise of your question is right. These are essentially the same economics at play and the same policy goals. We're trying to introduce competition on networks that do require investment. Wholesale-based service level competition is a proven way to do that on broadband networks, and essentially the same thing will also work on mobile.
If anything, it seems to me we're squeezing the resellers. And to your point, TekSavvy, and the wholesale rate conversation, walk me through why, as a consumer, I used to be a consumer of TekSavvy, why, as a consumer, where I haven't seen increased quality, but I've seen increased costs significantly over the last 5 years. Why would that be?
Can I just clarify, do you mean increased cost from competitors or overall in internet services?
Overall in home internet services. I can't find, in my home internet service, at least in the east end of Toronto, a package that I paid for 5 years ago for less than, say, $60.
I mean, right now, home internet services are really dictated for competitors and for retail. They are
The floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I think what we have heard this morning from all of the witnesses is that there is quite a disconnect between some of the things that we hear are going to happen because of whether it be government policy or telco's commitment to rural broadband, and some of the other things that are happening on the ground. And that this is part of what this study is about. We've been working on this for years, actually, to try to get some sort of certainty associated with it. But I think we've heard the diverse views here today. So I'd like to start my questioning, first of all, to TekSavvy. As you pointed out, in early 2019, the CRTC announced a review of the Canadian wireless industry with the goal of enabling competition through mandated wholesale services for competitors known as the Mobile Virtual Network Operators, or MVNOs. And of course, we've seen the same process unfold for internet service providers. So in your final submission to the CRTC in July of 2020, you note, and I quote, "The value MVNOs can provide to Canadians comes not from simply lowering prices, but rather from creating new, innovative services that target underserved and unserved market niches that are not being served by existing players." But we hear on the other side that these MVNOs are causing issues with other groups. So first of all, I wonder if you could expand on the idea, and how would MVNOs do a better job of providing wireless services in let's say, central Alberta than the incumbent carriers?
So thanks for the question. The CRTC has taken a preliminary view that MVNOs are a necessary way to introduce more competition in the mobile network and the mobile market. And now, of course, we're waiting for a decision from them. MVNOs, of course, as a competitive option, should introduce pressure on pricing. So the obvious sort of competitive benefits in terms of price for consumers. But TekSavvy also highlighted that MVNOs serve particular market niches, typically in countries where MVNOs exist. And actually, we saw this play out in Canada, not with MVNOs, but with small facilities-based providers like Wind. And going by memory, because we have to go back several years to remember these mobile competitors that were introduced, Public maybe, they appeared in cities. They were facilities-based. They introduced a competitive alternative, and they eventually were swallowed up by Canada's dominant incumbents. They serve communities, but of course within the footprints where the MNO's networks exist. So in rural Alberta, of course, an MVNO with wholesale services is only going to be available in communities where dominant provider already has a network with services. But when we talk about serving communities with unmet needs, and we're talking more about population groups, so it may be particular. It may be affordability, but it may also be particular cultural groups. It may be particular subsectors of society who are just not served by the existing packages that are available.
And then back to you again. In February 2020, TekSavvy filed a complaint with the Competition Bureau against Bell and Rogers, and you mentioned that, and this for anti-competitive practice. Can you tell the committee what the gist of that complaint was?
Yeah, so this, just to pivot away from mobile, of course, and look back at the wholesale services that are really our bread and butter. That specifically addressed Bell and Rogers anti-competitive practices, where on the one hand, in front of the CRTC, they have inflated the wholesale rates for years that wholesale-based competitors like us pay, and that effectively keeps our competitive pricing high and doesn't allow us to discipline their pricing. So it keeps all retail internet pricing high across Canada. And then at the same time, starting in about 2016, Bell and Rogers both introduced flanker brands, which sort of pretend to be competitors, but are not. They're brand names of the incumbents. And they introduced pricing that was specifically targeted at undercutting competitors' pricing. So on the one hand, they were keeping our pricing high, and on the other hand, they were undercutting us in the market. And our complaint makes the argument that that's an abuse of dominance. And it has really squeezed us for the past years, where we're unable to price our services low enough to discipline their pricing, which is what a competitor should be able to do. And if we raise our pricing so that we operate within the rates that they've set, then we lose customers because flanker brands are offering services at lower rates.
I see that I only have a few seconds left, so I will cede that for a later round. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.